You ever heard that phrase? Somebody's trying to decide something, they're working through, I just need to go sleep on it. Well, that is an old, I should have Googled to find out where that phrase first came into being, you know, sort of like the phraseology, whatever the etymology of phrases is, it's probably its own science. But whoever made that up, gosh, there are a lot of those, by the way. I should do a show one day on the wisdom of the old sayings. Like, you fall off a horse, get back on. There's so much science now to back up that old wisdom. Best thing you can do, get back on that horse. If you don't want that glued to your brain and creating a lot of increasing fear and panic attacks and anxiety, get back on that horse. Well, this is one of them. Sleep on it. Sleep on it. What do we mean when we say sleep on it? Well, a lot of times people have to make a decision. They have to process stuff. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the application of that phrase to when you are having some kind of a moment, some kind of a conflict. And I literally use, literally mean it as a metaphor. I literally don't mean to use this concretely. What I want you to hear sleep on it as is this: shut up and and take a minute before you say anything. Take an hour, take an afternoon, sleep on it overnight, take a week, take a month. But here is the principle, and I've seen this over and over and over and over again. In fact, I just had a extremely high performing corporate leader tell the team a great example of where he saw this in his work, that somebody had said something to him and an idea, and he just felt like he found himself getting territorial and defensive and and then but he didn't say anything. And then he said he didn't have a chance to come back at the guy, and he was pretty bugged and pretty mad. He didn't say anything, didn't have a chance. And then he went home and he said, I slept on it. I woke up the next morning and I was thinking, he does have a point. If I look at it from his perspective, that, there's some truth to that. Okay, a great conclusion to this conflict. A great conclusion to the conflict. Why? Well, that's the value of sleep on it. Now, here's what that moment does. And I want you to think about this in an array of different scenarios. One is you get blindsided with a confrontation you weren't ready for, okay? You didn't expect. Or maybe it even hits a sensitive area. Well, immediately we're going to go into either hurt or, some kind of threat or fight or flight, something, and we get defensive or we get hurt. We can't really think, whatever it is. But the last thing we're doing is assimilating and accommodating the information that we just got. Well, when we're feeling that way and we're feeling, defensive or want to get our idea in there, something quick, but there's an agitation to it. There's a something is aroused in us. Here's what I want you to understand, that wise person I heard share this earlier understood or learned. In that state of arousal, when somebody's bugging you and you want to come back and you get defensive or you want to argue or you want to convince them, in that moment, you might as well have hit freeze on time, taken your adult self, sent them home, and brought in your 3-year-old self to negotiate that problem with you. Now, here's what I mean by that. When you're feeling, you get a little amped up, your IQ drops because you don't have access to the smarter parts of your brain. Because fight or flight is kicked in, you're taking a cortisol shower, you got adrenaline, all of this. And as that ramps up, your thinking brain goes down and you have less access to choices of different ways to respond. You have less access to the judgment aspects of your brain. You have less access to the linear thinking part of your brain that thinks, well, this is how we're going to get through this conflict. There's 3 or 4 steps to this. You have less access to regulatory functions in your brain, impulse control, and have some unexpressed thoughts. And don't say this, say it this, but say it in this way. All of those things that make for a good resolution of something, you don't have available to you in that moment if you're feeling amped up, the way your brain works. That's why when they train special ops, they put them through so many iterations of what possibly could happen to them that they're not amped up at all. They know how to handle it and they handle it and they have great strategic thinking in that moment, unlike us when we're surprised by something. So, what's the answer? Well, number one is have less triggers inside, right? The more we are offendable, I always say one of the greatest things you can do in your life is to become the least offendable person that you can be. The strongest people don't take offense at everything. One of the problems with our culture today is everybody takes offense at everything. Now, there are some things that are offensive, but a lot of times people are, everybody's, I mean, even on the streets, and I mean, everybody's so touchy, right? So deal with our own kind of touchiness. We all have these buttons that can get pushed. Let's, go buttonless or whatever, more than work on that. The least offendable you are, the more effective you are. It's a big deal. Look at a bouncer in a bar, coolest cucumber in the room. Somebody come up and kind of try to pick a fight with them, they won't do it. They'll handle the situation very effectively. But some idiot at the bar, you can pick a fight with almost anybody, but they're not really that in charge. So the least offendable that we can be, that's one thing. But secondly, we all get offended in some way, that we get defensive or one of our buttons gets pushed or we get threatened or whatever. That's human. It's not good all the time, but it's human. And so what I'm saying at that moment, take a minute. And you can define what that is. When your car overheats, you don't keep driving. This is not rocket science. Actually, it's neuroscience, but it's not rocket science. But you don't keep driving, right? You pull off the road and you let it cool down or you help it cool down. Then you go back on the road. So sleep on it, take a minute. Look at it this way. Let's take the 10-second rule. Before you respond, just kind of think about that for a second. And just feel yourself starting to calm down, get a little different perspective, have some unexpressed thoughts, and then you're going to get to a different answer. Now, this can happen in your family, it can happen in your marriage. Kids can do this to you, or your spouse can do this to you, or your extended family can do this to you, or it can happen in work. There's a lot of different scenarios for this, but it makes a lot of sense to have in your toolbox the ability to, I'm going to think about that for a second. Very important tool. And then I'll tell you one more story, and then we'll go to some calls. 844-940-2774, 844-940-2774 is the number to get on the show. I was I was about to leave my office one Friday afternoon, and the CEO of a very, very big public company that you would know the name of called me late Friday afternoon. And he said, "Hey, I'm going to send you an email. The chairman of the board sent out a memo today, and it's my response to it. So I just want to get your input before I send it to the entire board." Because what he did was, he said, it's so wrong. It's so the wrong direction. It's such a, he said, so I have to do something, So anyway, I've crafted a response. So I said, okay. So I go check my email, and I'm reading his response to what the chairman had done. And what the chairman had done truly was kind of egregious in a way. It was not good. But I read his response, and I picked up the phone and I called him and I said, "Dude, shut down your computer and go skiing for the weekend and call me on Monday. Do not send that response to the board. Just get away from it all. Call me on Monday." He goes, "What do you?" I said, "Just do what I tell you." So he did. He calls me on Monday. He said, so I reread it, and really glad I didn't send that. Totally different eyes when he read it on Monday. His own composition, totally different eyes. He slept on it in a different part of his brain. And I said, "Okay, write me another one." And he wrote another one. Incredibly strategic, well done, would move the ball down the road, would de-escalate conflict, a lot of good stuff. Take a minute. Don't speak when you're hot. Should not do that most times unless you're screaming at somebody to get out of the way because the train is coming.